There are some players that are flying under the radar during training camp that are actually balling out. We're going to cover those players today, plus some other players that might impact your fantasy football rosters right now. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button because we're talking about these players every day. We're talking about training camp every day, looking at the clips. We're going over draft strategies for redraft, dynasty, and everything else right here on this channel. Click that button. Stop missing out. But we're covering 12 players today. The first one, Michael Wilson. He's low-key breaking out in training camp. He's looking good. And then think about last year as a rookie, about an 85% route participation rate. He was good enough to be on the field early in his career, good enough to get snaps, good enough to get looks, something to take note of. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get most of the work here. Probably 25 to 30% of the targets. On the low end, 20 to 25%. Michael Wilson, though, at round 15 draft capital on underdog, if you're looking for a cheap wide receiver that might give you a return on investment, and that return on investment might end up being like 10 to 12 points per game, might look like that, probably more than 8.3, and probably won't have those low-end weeks, you might be looking at him. I would guess his production this year, if on the field for a full season, would be very spiky with Marvin Harrison Jr. taking most of the workload. He might post a couple big games and then a lot of small ones, but those big performances might be enough for you to gamble on if they're in the right matchup, especially if you're hurting at wide receiver and you got to gamble. He's probably going to be a wide receiver you pluck off the waiver wire this season from time to time. Andre Yoshi, we're going to call him Yoshi, wide receiver 79, round 15. Balling out training camp, working for the wide receiver 3 job here in Cincinnati. Might land it. If anything, it could be like a split role between him and Burton. But Yoshi over here is just gobbling it up. He's getting some workload in training camp. The buzz is around him with the beat writers. He might be a sneaky add to your team. And on underdog, average draft position, last pick in drafts, people are speculating on him. Right behind Jermaine Burton. Burton, wide receiver 71, round 14 draft capital, looking good in training camp, building a rapport with Joe Burrow. We've seen that from OTAs, minicamp to now. He was missing some time at practice. Now he's back. He's explosive. He can get downfield. It's between him and Yoshi for the starting role as the wide receiver 3. Jaylen Tolbert has been making plays in training camp. And I'm not saying this happens every year, but he's getting a little better every year. And we're starting to notice this. He was making plays with Trey Lance, who was throwing him deep balls the other day in practice. He switched to number 1, which looks way more appealing than number 18 on him. The thing about him, 3.3 points per game last year, which was an increase from the year before. CeeDee Lamb's going to see over 25% share of the targets. Brandon Cooks is going to see a large amount of targets. Is there enough for him to get more than 10 points per game? Probably not. But he could be one of those flashy players this year. Round 18 draft capital. More than likely, he's going to be free in your league. So a player to monitor off waivers. In Dynasty, he's free. If you want to take that stab, you're hurting at wide receiver, it's not going to cost you anything. He's probably sitting on waivers in shallow leagues. But the Cowboys did not bring in any wide receivers of consequence after Michael Gallup left. Jaylen Tolbert's going to get more run. He's going to get more opportunity. Could give you some upside weeks here and there. Might be a wide receiver you want to play with in your lineups. J.J. McCarthy is going off in practice. Last week, he really let it rip. He had some Patrick Mahomes in him, throwing it off platform, throwing it sidearm, fitting it into tight windows. McCarthy's starting to outplay Darnold at practice. That is the reports from training camp from the Vikings. That being said, something to take note of. He might get on the field earlier than expected. Sam Darnold might start off as the starter, but if anything goes wrong, just one little hiccup, McCarthy might be in there, but he might win out the starting job outright. He might do that, but we're watching this hardcore because that might be a quarterback you want in redraft on the cheap with Justin Jefferson and company. A faster-paced offense last 3 years, top 5 in pace of play. The Vikings want to be fast-paced, though they want the quarterback to allow them to be fast-paced. And if that's McCarthy, they're going to roll with that. I'm just saying, watch this in training camp. You might catch a rookie starter here week 1, or a buffer with Sam Darnold to start off the season. But McCarthy's days are coming sooner than realized. JT Sanders was getting some run last week. He's been looking good in training camp. No draft capital, really. He's not getting drafted. Tight end 35, 215 ADP, but not enough to really get drafted on the draft board in underdog fantasy. Some people are taking some stabs on him, but not a lot. Redraft-wise, he's going to be sitting on waivers most of the year. And in Dynasty, people got him as a speculative asset there, cheap in rookie drafts. Pay attention to him because he is starting to make plays in training camp. He is starting to ramp up. Cooper Kupp, and we're talking about him due to the Puka Nacua injury. Watch his stock increase a little bit. Watch fantasy managers hold him a little bit tighter to their chest. But Cooper Kupp will get more targets if Puka Nacua's out any bit of the season. Puka Nacua is listed as week to week, but we all know that could end up being month to month or longer than expected, so something to monitor for the long term. Demarcus Robinson, re-signed for a 1-year, $4 million contract in February, is going to be another player to look out for during this time because Puka, maybe he's out week 1 or 2 or something like that. Got to pay attention to that. But last year, back end of the season, the back 9, double-digit PPR fantasy performances. We were yelling at you guys to pick him up off waivers. You might be picking him up off waivers again to start the season, but another situation to monitor. Marshawn Lloyd was pegged as the third-string running back in the media earlier last week. However, the thing about this, he ripped off a 50-yard run Saturday and went bonkers in practice. The guy's got speed, the guy's got pop, and even if he's listed as the RB3 on the depth chart, does not mean he won't get opportunity if something happens to Josh Jacobs. He's still an upside play, and he's always going to be an upside play until he starts showing you more snaps and touches out of the backfield. He's a speculative asset, especially in redraft. Dynasty, a cheap pick in rookie drafts at the running back position with a lot of pop here. More of a long-term play for Dynasty as well, considering he's a third-round pick. He's got a lot of upside for the future. Josh Jacobs is there to be the guy, but Marshawn Lloyd does have some upside to his game, and pay attention to him in training camp as well. Pay attention to the depth chart. Pay attention to how this roster unravels if something happens to Josh Jacobs. Trayon Burks. DeAndre Hopkins went down with an injury. This is his time to step up. He has been looking good in training camp. He is healthy now. He's looking quicker. Pay attention to Trayon Burks, and he has no ADP pretty much. ADP of 213, but that's not draftable on Underdog. Watch his stock rise a little bit in those drafts, but Trayon Burks, this is his time to shine if he's ever going to do it with the Titans. Bryce Young has been spitting fire in training camp. He has been locked, loaded, and ready to explode. He's been accurate. He's been getting the ball out quick. This offense looks a lot quicker, faster, and he is ready to hit with Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's looking good as well, creating separation, really getting yards after the catch. Bryce Young, every day at practice, he's putting together highlights. I think we're going to see an uptick in his production this year. Jalen Hyatt is another wide receiver. I think he's going to be more of a spiky asset for you in fantasy football. More of a player that will give you a lot of nothing than a little bit of something. A lot of nothing, a little bit of something. Malik Neighbors is going to get a 20+% target share. Easy. He's going to command a ton of targets. Wan'Dale Robinson, another wide receiver to look out for. But Jalen Hyatt's been looking good in training camp with the speed and explosiveness. I would not be surprised if he provides a few splash performances this year. Might be best for best ball. Or if you're plucking somebody off waivers and you're playing the matchups, you might want to look at Hyatt from time to time, depending on how you're setting your lineups for that week. But those are 12 players making noise in training camp that could impact your fantasy lineups. We go a little bit deep. We go a little bit shallow, but we go everywhere here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.